So here we are at level 2, mission number 2, which is about logic and emotion. Now, it has perplexed me for years that the very, very basic functions of business don't recognize the difference between logic and emotion. We assume everything is logical. We assume that conversation is logical. We get into arguments, we get embroiled, and then we admit, frankly, over a coffee later, maybe it did get a bit emotional, maybe it did get a bit political, which is what emotions actually are. And there is very little study of emotion and logic in business, because if there were, we would be able to build relationships by understanding where the emotion is coming from, what to do with it, and how to bring people into a logical frame of mind so we can have a pretty good discussion with them. Let me share something with you to illustrate this. So here we go. Understanding people is definitely about understanding the way the brain works. A guy who's superb at this is Dr. Rick Hanson. Would definitely recommend his book, Hardwiring Happiness, which talks about how our brains are wired quite often to be unhappy. And actually, if you want to be happy, then you recognize that we can begin to rewire them. Let's look at the basics of the way he's outlining that the brain works. And being a neurologist, I tend to believe him. There we go, the evolved human brain over millennia, ending up in that red bit at the front, which is the cognitive bit that has got us to land on the moon and build the internet and do all sorts of unbelievable things. And of course, it all started back down the base of the spine here with the brain stem. These are the original brains that we have, if you like, the original part of the brain, shall we say. And of course, that part of the brain triggers and fires off when we are in survival mode. And you might think, well, that's not very often, is it? Because I get on the tube, I go to work, I travel by train, everything's safe. And interestingly, what Rick Hanson is saying, and all neurologists are actually saying, is that this part of the brain is firing all of the time. The next part of the brain to start to build, the lower midbrain, more base emotions, bonding, caring, fight, flight, playfulness, as you can see, and culminating in the higher brain operation, which is the neocortex, the logic, the clear problem solving and thinking processes, where we can build really good relationships because we can solve things together in business. So where are we heading with this in this very brief introduction to the brain? We'll have a guess at which parts of the brain govern our thinking most of the time. And yes, you'd be right, it is the lower brain and it's the brain stem that govern the thinking that we have in our heads most of the time. Waves of brain activity coming through those basic parts of the human brain give predispositions of feelings and emotions. And then what do? We make up the logic to suit the feelings. We actually create logic and logical arguments in order to justify the feelings that we've got. We might feel we need the team to work together better, so we argue in logic that that should be the case. We might feel that we need more time independently. We need to make quicker decisions, so we build the logic to suit the case. We start with emotions. We are creatures of emotion. And when we can ascertain what the other's emotions are and where they're coming from, then we can begin to understand and bring them into more logic of conversation. How do we do this? That's for the next part.